The Blast from Our Past Network.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this month's episode of Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura. I am 1/3 of the TV Obscura team, Corey, a.k.a. Sleazy C. Joined with me, as always, are my two brothers from other mothers, Zach, the Total Snackhead Schaefer, and Diallo, the Armageddon Jackson. And this month, guys and gals, is a big one. Big one from all of our childhoods. We are discussing specifically the Harmony Gold Robotech the Macross Saga. That's not to be confused with the Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, or Genesis Climber Mospiata.
Mospidia.
Mospidia. Not to, yeah, so just so you guys all are all aware, we're talking about the U.S. bastardization, conglomerization of those three shows into one Robotech series, but specifically we are talking about the Macross Saga this month. But we're going to do something different. I'm going to be talking about the cartoons. Zach's going to talk about the toys. And then Diallo is going to unleash all of his knowledge on the rest of the series, the rest of the franchise, and the conversation will just kind of go where it goes. So, guys and gals, how's it going? Welcome to, this one's been a long time coming, I imagine, but welcome to the month of Robotech.
Robotech.
Dun, 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 dun.
Just call me Lunk for the whole episode. Ooh, that's a deep cut right there.
That is a deep cut. Before we jump into it, because I'm going to have this kind of a big sort of Wikipedia thing to read to kind of get everybody on the same page. But really quickly, and we'll elaborate much further, but really quickly, what is your experience with Robotech, specifically the Macross cartoons that came out in 1985, Diallo?
I stumbled across it, it was pretty much launched in the Bay Area. It was like a lot of fanfare. I think I missed like that first few weeks somehow, but they had a movie version of the first journey of the SDF-1, and I watched that and I was hooked, and then went back and watched the rest, and it was appointment TV for me for the next however long it was on. So much so that I remember the finale of the new generation with the fighting the Invid. After school, I used to have to pick up my brother and sister after school every day, and I was in high school, and I asked my dad that day, I was like, can I not pick them up? Because I really
Can I not do this today?
Yeah, because I really this is I invested a three months, and so I just wanted to see how it all ended, and he was like, props to dad. He let me he picked them up or something, and I got to watch the finale, and it was like everything I wanted, so.
He was like, you couldn't get a Nintendo when you were younger, but I will let you watch the Macross finale.
Yeah, it's like the one episode one day.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Zach, what is your familiarity with specifically the 1985 Harmony Gold cartoon series?
Yeah, similar to Diallo in the sense that growing up in the Bay Area, I think it was TV 26. That was the station that aired Robotech, so that's the station I watched Robotech on. We did not own a VCR at the time, so I was not able to record the episodes. And if you're not able to record episodes and rewatch them over and over again, then you're stuck basically watching them whenever you have the opportunity to. I think I raced home from school. I feel like it was an after-school show. I'm not totally clear on that. I don't remember. But I would race home to watch it daily and was instantly hooked as well and loved the show so much. And then I think the home video market would trickle out, that movie that Diallo mentioned, or maybe a block of episodes, and I would rent those on a regular basis from the local video store. And it was a huge part of my childhood until either the time got changed or it got replaced with a different cartoon, or, but I feel like I was watching Robotech for a huge chunk of my childhood as well.
Yeah, I'm a little bit younger than both of you guys, so I didn't actually catch it when it first came out. I would have been 7 when that was in syndication. So for me, it was all on VHS, and I can remember renting. One VHS would have 3 episodes. So if you have to rent 3 VHSs in order to get like 9 episodes, that's still not the entire thing. So it wasn't until I actually got this new Blu-ray that I think Funimation just put out, and my understanding is that because of the whole rights things, I think Harmony Gold expanded. They were going to be up in 2021 with the Japanese studio, and they actually renewed them. And then I think like Funimation is putting them out now, and Sony owns like 95% of Funimation. So I guess this is now technically a Sony product. But as a kid, this series kind of like lived in this mythical sort of realm where I was aware of it and everything, and I loved it, but I also didn't quite understand the backstory behind it, and that's also going to get into why I have such a long breakdown of things and to discuss, because it has a very convoluted backstory. But my experience with it was renting the VHSs and just being like, oh my God, this is the first cartoon I've ever seen that people actually die in. And that would be sort of when I tell it to my friends at the schoolyard, like, oh my God, this show Robotech, like people actually die. It's not like G.I. Joe. That would always be like sort of my quote, and then of course the Veritech fighters are just a whole other thing we'll get into.
Right.
So I have kind of a long sort of thing right now, like a sort of a summary of the backstory of Robotech. Diallo, feel free to interject at any moment, or just save it for whatever you feel is appropriate. If you want to save it for later to kind of expand upon. But I'm hoping that this will kind of lay the groundwork for the discussion we're about to have, because I didn't know any of this stuff until I started researching it. Only thing I ever knew was that this American cartoon called Robotech, was an amalgamation of multiple other cartoons, but I didn't quite understand like what that meant or how that sort of worked. But I hope Diallo can probably help me flesh that out a little bit. So, all right, guys, you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
Ready.
Cue the theme music. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Robotech is an 85-episode American adaptation of 3 unrelated Japanese anime series and aired in 1985. Robotech was one of the first anime televised in the United States that attempted to include most of the complexity and drama of its original Japanese source material. Produced by Harmony Gold in association with Tatsunoko Productions, Robotech is a story adapted with edited content and revised dialogue from the animation of 3 different shows. They were the Super Dimension Fortress Macross from 1982, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross from 1984, and Genesis Climber, what was it called, Diallo?
It's like it's Mospita.
Mospita from 1983. Harmony Gold's reasoning for combining these unrelated series was its decision to market Macross as an American weekday syndicated television series, which required a minimum of 65 episodes at the time. That's 13 weeks at 5 episodes per week. That was the norm. Macross and the 2 other series had fewer episodes than required since they originally aired in Japan as a weekly series. Harmony Gold hired American writers to adapt the scripts of the 3 Japanese series. This complicated process was supervised by producer Carl Macek, a pioneer of the anime industry in the United States. This combination resulted in a storyline that spans 3 generations as mankind must fight 3 destructive Robotech wars in succession over a powerful energy source called protoculture. The first Robotech war is called the Macross Saga, the second is called Robotech Masters, and the third is called the New Generation. Diallo will speak about the Robotech Masters and the New Generations in a little bit, but here's a brief summary of the Macross Saga. The story focuses on humanity's discovery of a crashed alien ship and subsequent battle against a race of giant warriors called the Zentradi, who have been sent to retrieve the ship for reasons unknown. In the course of this chapter, Earth is nearly annihilated, the Zentradi are defeated, and humans gain knowledge of the energy source called protoculture. Humanity also learns of the Robotech Masters, whose galactic empire the Zentradi protected and patrolled. Diallo, how accurate was that?
That sounds pretty accurate. One thing I want to mention, this is like actually a really cool firsthand kind of story about Carl Macek, is that, I mean, we set our Wayback Machines to the year 2000. I was at my first Comic-Con, and I was just, having wandered around all day, and then I was out on this balcony or whatever having lunch. And behind me, there was this guy telling this story, and I got my ear hustle on and realized that it was Carl Macek sitting right behind me, and he's being interviewed by 2 guys writing an article. So he was telling the story of how he came up with the whole process of the story for Robotech. So, I was like leaning back and I'm like, oh my God, this is, this
and
is
if
happening.
you had like an iPhone or something, you just hit record and
yeah.
just...
Yeah.
Right?
If I had it I had that at the time. But basically he said, this is probably all documented out there now, but basically he said that he watched the entire series with the sound off, like all 3.
Okay.
And then he was able to actually like find elements that he could connect from one to another to get that overarching story that we have, that because those shows are actually like, they're not connected at all. So that's how he came up with stuff. So like protoculture actually isn't an actual thing, an energy source. It's like more like, it literally is like culture.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
It wasn't supposed to be where the origin of like humans and Zentradi and the master, like we all came from the same place or something, right?
Right. And but he took that and then took the elements from like Robotech Masters. They had these flowers going on, and then in the New Generation one, the Genesis Climber Mosquito, that had all these flowers, and he was able to connect that all to like making protoculture like this energy source that was powering all the robotechnology, he called it.
It's so funny because as I was eating dinner talking to Myra, sort of mentally prepping for this, I was kind of explaining it to her, and I was like, we were just thinking like, man, how like what would the process be of watching 3 different TV shows and trying to create a story all together for all of them, and I guess it means you watch them without sound and you try to just create it in your head. That's very interesting, dude.
Yeah. So it was really cool that I just like, as obsessed as I am, and it just is sitting literally right behind me. But
that's amazing.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Absolutely amazing. So during this chunk, let's talk about this cartoon again, specifically the American version of Robotech. This cartoon, this syndicated season. Zach, what kind of what did you think of the cartoon, and what sort of gravitated you towards it?
I think what initially led me to watch it was how different it looked back in the day versus American animated cartoon series, that I was used to. and the depth of drama that it had versus other cartoons, the lack of the kind of moral message throughout, like that He-Man had or G.I. Joe had or Transformers a little bit, even though those studios were not necessarily just American studios when it came to animation outside of Filmation. I think the fact that it was like focused on a specific storyline throughout versus like little one-off episodes, like what I think we were used to here in the States, that's what attracted me to it. Like I said, the lack of a moral message in the sense like we have to deliver this message to the kids watching. It wasn't about that. It was like, let's focus on the actual story. Let's focus on building these characters up, getting to know these characters, seeing them in an everyday life. It wasn't all just action centric. There was drama going on that didn't have to do with the big set piece at the end of the episode, or there wasn't a big like climax at every episode. It was always like these little things that built a terrific story that I wasn't used to seeing in a, after school cartoon time slot. So watching it at that point, I was like, whoa, this is so rad. And of course I tried to like emulate the animation. I would try to draw, Roy Fokker and Rick Hunter and terribly, because I couldn't do that. Like that was so in to draw that anime style. And it's so funny. You flash forward 10, 20 years later. And then, when Pokemon comes out and people are like obsessed with Pokemon, and you're like, well, that's cool. But Robotech was doing a very similar like animation with this cool style back in the day. You should check that out too. It has nothing to do with Pokemon, but it's pretty awesome too. I was drawn into just how different it was than the daily grind of all the cartoons that we were watching here.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Diallo, same question to you, man. What initially drew you into it when you first saw it on TV?
For me, I was already really into whatever bits of anime that we got back then. Kind of ate it up in it. I mean, it was if you go back to like those times, it was really hard to find like series. We just basically got the best of the best of the best over here, and it was highly edited. Going back to like we've done Gatchaman on this show before, Battle of the Planets / G-Force. I was obsessed with that. Star Blazers / Yamato. I was really obsessed with that. Speed Racer, all those kind of things. And then the random things that, they had an edited, Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs, Captain Harlock and the Queen of 1,000 Years, which were two shows that were like put together kind of in the same fashion as Robotech. So whenever any of those things came on, I was there to watch it. So that wasn't like the sell for me. But it's like really good. So I watched it and I just, was kind of blown away. And I think the draw for me was that, it came out here after Transformers was on, and I really liked the idea of the mecha. So it was like robots, but it wasn't sentient robots. It was people piloting them, and they weren't like, it wasn't like giant Sentai or, Voltron type stuff. It was actually just like, on a much smaller scale. But then you had this new concept with the SDF-1, the Macross city. And that whole thing really like made it seem different. And then there was the story, the soap opera element, and that drew me in. So, wasn't a tough sell for me to get there. But when I was there, it definitely was head and shoulders above everything else I had seen in my head for the most part, except for like the Yamato was the first cartoon I can really remember where there was like a kind of tune in every episode, because there was a progression of it, because they were trying to get to Iskandar and back to Earth in a year. And so there was like a chronological order to that. But here it was just, completely like times 1,000.
So did Battleship Yamato, did it come out in syndication in America too?
Yeah, it did. It came out in the late 70s, like really late 70s here in the US, like 78, 79, I think 77 maybe. It was like after Star Wars came out, they were just like, that Gatchaman, Star Blazers, or Battle of the Planets. Yeah. So yeah, it was all syndication. Everything was syndication. There, I don't remember anything being on network TV at all.
That makes sense that, all of a sudden, obviously Star Wars hits, it's huge. Obviously sci-fi, everyone's like, oh my God, it's it makes more sense to go and mine something that's already been finished and just alter it than try to create something new. Cause then also you're going to be adding on that time to create it. Whereas you can drop it now if all you have to do is redub something or whatever, like, Battleship Yamada or whatever. Zach, I cut you off. What were you saying, buddy?
Oh, no, I was going to tag on to what Diallo was saying as far as accessibility is concerned, because, both of us growing up in the Bay Area, TV 26 had a bunch of anime on at that time. I remember Captain Harlock was on as well, and that's when I was first introduced to Captain Harlock in the 80s, and even though it was from the 70s, or late 70s. And I think there were a couple other shows. I don't remember them specifically, but maybe Ulysses
31 or whatever.
Yeah, because that was on Nickelodeon,
Yeah.
Actually, at one point. And then I think The Lost City of Gold was another one that was also on Nickelodeon. But Captain Harlock and Robotech, I think, were back to back on TV 26. And that was amazing, Like, the kids these days, they just don't get it. Sincerely, they really don't, because it was so hard to find these shows, and it was on like one channel, right? And it was such an exciting time because like I said, never seen something like this before, and just a different kind of approaching storytelling for kids. It was mature, and it made me feel like, it didn't feel kiddie. And I was 9 and 10 at the time. In 85, I was 9. I was in the height of like playing with my toys, and especially G.I. Joe, and creating like serious storylines with my action figures. This is what I got with Robotech, so I would create with my G.I. Joes. I would further on storylines with my G.I. Joes based on like what I saw on Robotech.
Yeah, Zach, it's funny because like you're like kids these days, but like really, like they don't.
It's true.
People don't really realize, because like actually Robotech actually gets a lot of like. It gets a lot of like blowback from like the diehard, otaku guy, because it's like edited or whatever.
Right.
But like, for me, it's like, I get that, because obviously, like, I grew up with Battle of the Planets, but when I discovered like the original Gatchaman, I really got into that, and I'm obsessed with that. But I don't turn around and hate on Battle of the Planets either, because that was the only way it was going to get to me in the first place.
Right.
And with Robotech, it had the problem was, and Voltron had this too, where they, like you talked about it, it actually needed to be in syndication. It needed X amount of episodes to run. So it, as good as Macross was, it didn't have enough for that business side, so they had to do something. And I've actually watched the Macross, the unedited versions, and it's pretty close,
Okay.
So with some, like, they cut some scenes out, and they changed some dialogue here and there, but it's pretty close to the original, except for like the whole protoculture stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, like people don't get, like, it wasn't until like the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s, when you started to be able to just like step out your door and like get anime, Like
Yeah.
I would be in I worked in a video store in the mid 90s, so I was able to get like some of the videos and access to that. I had to go to I remember had a laser disc store, and I found all these Bubblegum Crisis ones, which I was obsessed with. But like other than that, like you couldn't just see the stuff. So it was, the only way you really got it was if it was like syndicated here, and that was I had to watch. Robotech for me, Zach, came on TV 44, but
Okay.
I remember Star Blazers came on TV 36, which was in San Jose, and I was in
Yeah.
like San Francisco, So, and like we barely got the signal. I didn't have cable, but I would sit there and try like watch it. It's all grainy, you know.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing with wrestling and NWA stuff. But it's like because that was the only way I could watch it, you know.
Right.
Only way. So it was Wild West back in the day.
It really was.
And kind of to all those points, like I didn't get a chance to start seeing stuff like Dirty Pair and Bubblegum Crisis and Vampire D until, you know, Suncoast Video started, you know, actually carrying stuff like that. And then, you know, like this is like, yeah, early 90s, mid 90s ish, you know. So for me, I have very little remembrance of Robotech, like me seeing it on TV. Like I kind of even barely remember the toys. So I didn't sort of catch it when it was first out, but like by the time I was renting it, it was already something that I was aware of. And it became this mythical thing. Like, and again, to Diallo and Zach, your point of like kids today don't understand, there's something exciting about like not being able to get all the information right away at your fingertips. There's like this like discovery, a sense of discovery, which is what I'm hoping actually Diallo's segment at the end of this will kind of invoke that same feeling inside of me, because Zach and I didn't do any prep work for Diallo's thing because I'm specifically trying to recreate that schoolyard feeling of like when my friend would tell me about a movie that I didn't see before, you know. But what I was excited about Robotech, and I think Zach, you sort of mentioned it, but to Diallo, to your point about Voltron, even when I was a kid, I was fatigued by how formulaic every episode of Voltron was. It was to the point where I wasn't even excited about it because I was like, okay, they're going to fight the guy individually, the monster. They're not going to do well. They're going to turn into Voltron. They're going to call down the sword, and they're going to cut him in half. Every 99% of the episodes are like that. Whereas Robotech had this ongoing, persistent story. The Veritech fighters were cool as hell. Loved them so much. Guardian mode for life. Love Guardian mode. And it's probably why my Jetfire arm broke off, because you could get him into Guardian mode, but you had to kind of force it, you know. I loved it, and as a kid, I was like, "This is amazing." You know, like I said, I would tell my friends who didn't know about Robotech, I'd be like, "People actually die and everything," and you know, and I kind of want to talk about what our experiences are with it as an adult as well, because I know we've all recently watched it at some point. But I do want to say that I showed Myra, you know, so Myra and I were getting ready for our Japanese trip. And by the time this actually drops, guys and gals, my wife and I will literally be flying over the Pacific Ocean to Japan. And we've been watching a lot of Studio Ghibli stuff and everything because we're going to go to the Studio Ghibli Museum. But I was like, hey, know, we're watching, you know, Myra, we're watching your favorite anime. I want to show you mine. I showed her Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, which she loved, which I think actually that was a Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, it was Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, which I didn't know at the time, which is funny. I actually didn't know that was a Studio Ghibli movie, but I loved that movie as a kid. And I showed her Robotech. And she very much enjoyed all the action elements, but she very much hated Min-Mei. And just, I mean, even to this day, like I'm up to this day. I mean, we watched it like a month ago, you know, but even now we'll kind of mock Min-Mei and just randomly be like, I gotta go get my diary, otherwise somebody's gonna read it, you know, and whatnot. But like, you know, and I told her, I was like, well, you know, in my defense as a kid, I never cared about Min-Mei anyways. I kind of zoned out during the Min-Mei episodes, especially episode 4 when Rick and Min-Mei are sort of stuck in that.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, I kind of didn't really pay attention to that episode and was waiting for the next one when I rented them. But one thing that I felt vindicated by. So when I was a kid, again, going back to what I would tell all my friends about, there was one scene in particular in the second or third episode where a random Veritech fighter is like, I think he's in Guardian mode, kind of skimming across a freeway, and a battle pod comes up right next to him in his profile and fires the gun, and the dude gets obliterated in the cockpit. And as a kid, that was literally my favorite scene, and I would tell everyone, I would like describe it to them as my example of what was so awesome about Robotech. So watching it with Myra at this point, I think she was already pretty much getting checked out because of Minmay. When that specific moment happened, she went, "Oh, that's cool." And I was like, yes, that was cool, wasn't it? Like, literally, that one scene was fucking cool. But right now, I'm watching the Blu-ray set, the Funimation full Macross Saga Blu-ray set, but unfortunately, I'm watching it on my own at this point. And even tonight, prepping, like, I was watching an episode, and Myra just looks up, she's like, fucking Minmay.
I mean, that's accurate and fair, because Minmay has issues.
I know, and I was trying to tell her that. I was like, I don't think anyone really liked Minmay all that much back in the day.
Well, it's funny because I showed Bodhi the Christmas episode this past winter, and I won't spoil anything for you because we'll probably cover that episode specifically when we get to the Christmas episode, but I will spoil Minmay being annoying and how Bodhi is currently back into Pokemon again, and so we're watching all the Pokemon Journey shows, which are really good, by the way, on Netflix. If anyone's interested, they're really entertaining. But there's a lot more kind of dramatic subplot going on with the characters in one of the seasons. One where this girl's like obsessed with Psyduck, and like to the point where she wants a little girl that spends the night with her to wear a Psyduck pajama outfit, and the little girl's like, "Do you want me to just say Psyduck?" or something like that. It's really kind of creepy and hilarious too, because you're like, wow, they went there. So I think Minmay being that like kind of annoying character, Bodhi's used to annoying characters, because let's be honest, on Pokemon, there's a lot of annoying characters.
Yes, there are.
And none of them are the Pokemon. It's all of the humans. And so I think he's kind of like just used to that. So watching these, he wasn't really bothered by her. He was rolling his eyes at some of the comments she was making and the connection she had with Rick Hunter. And I said, well, when we start watching this series together, bud, you'll see their relationship go up and down and left and right. And he's like, oh no, really? And I'm like, yeah, well, it's one of the subplots of this show that'll just make you laugh. I think it'll make people laugh more now than it will cringe.
And as a kid, I didn't like Minmay, but it wasn't like, I just kind of knew to just mentally tune it out. It wasn't until Myra just was like, what the fuck is this bitch talking about? You know, like going back for her diary. She's like, you deserve to die. And I'm like, no, not Minmay, no.
It's funny because when I was I was teenager, 12, 13 or whatever, when Robotech came out. And I don't know. I didn't know any better. So I was
That's
fine
how I
with
feel.
it.
Yeah. I didn't know any better.
I was too.
Yeah. I was Team Minmay for the whole time. I was like, why is he going after Lisa? You know what? I was all invested in it. But as an adult now, I'm like, oh, God, Minmay was toxic. But also, Lisa wasn't a good choice either. Like people always like do this. Well, no, Lisa's better. I'm like, no, like neither of them were a good choice. And Rick is kind of trash for how he treated or at least treated Lisa anyway. So that whole love triangle is not anything to like cheer for anybody in. Just like putting that out there right now.
Cheer for Roy Fokker.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, Roy's the best.
Fokker.
Roy was
Roy
the coolest.
is the best.
And his
the coolest.
What was he? Skull Squadron? Was that his?
Yeah, Skull Squadron.
Oh, yeah.
That
was that was the Veritech that I always wanted. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, like Zach. Because I feel like now the conversation, I mean, we can always kind of roll back and talk about the cartoon and stuff.
Right.
It'll be an ongoing discussion, but we all either wanted to or did engage with the toys. So let's at least bring that into the conversation now so we can keep sort of moving forward with it.
Yeah. So it's funny, Diallo, you mentioned how, you know, and I did too, like kids these days, they'll never know what it's like to experience, you know, that one show. Now it's flooded everywhere, right? The toys were the same way, at least in the United States, because you go down to Little Tokyo in Los Angeles, like Diallo and I did a few weeks back, and, you know, everything you want from any current Japanese anime show is there. And you can buy the merch here in the United States. You can buy it online. You can buy it on Amazon, eBay, whatever. Back in the 80s, there was one toy line that came out, really. And when I say toy line, I'm not talking about a model company like Revell. Revell had put out a series of Robotech models, and I'm not dissing or hating on models, but that's not playable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really play with models. Matchbox, however, released what I consider a kick-ass toy line. I know it it gets a little bit of shit because of some of the play sets not being all that great, or as accurate as I think people had hoped. The toy line in particular was pretty awesome. It came out in 1985, and it's pretty broad. Matchbox released a series of 12-inch dolls, kind of like a Barbie line, with Dana Sterling, Lisa Hayes, Lynn Min-May, and Rick Hunter, right? It was just 4 dolls and Dana's hover cycle, and it's really hilarious. If you go to, and by the way, I'm using as a source material, I'm using figurerealm.com. They're great. They kind of catalog a lot of toy lines throughout history. So if you go on there, you click on a particular toy line, they have all the, TMNT, for example, you click on that, it shows you every single toy line that they released. And by year, it's really well cataloged. So figurerealm.com kind of lists in order when these toys came out. And like I said, the doll line came out first. I don't remember seeing those in stores, but I do remember the 6-inch and the 3 3/4 line that came out. The Zentradi figures were 6-inch, so they were bigger than the 3 3/4 humans, which were really cool. And it had a myriad of characters. I think they had maybe 7 or 8 characters. And then the 3 3/4 line had, I think the total toy line for figures was 15 figures. And it ranged from, Rick Hunter, Min-May, like I said in the onset, Lunk, which is a deep cut.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they released a Lunk figure, and apparently it's worth a lot of money nowadays. There were smaller, die-cast figures based on the mechs on the show, like the Excalibur, the Bioroid, and the Gladiator. And then they had some vehicles that the figures actually could fit in, like you mentioned, the Veritech fighter in the onset, but it didn't transform. And it didn't transform because there was, Transformers had released a Jetfire figure that is literally it's the same figure. It's a Veritech fighter.
To the point where whenever they release a Jetfire character now, he's completely redesigned, which I think he has more personality now. He actually has a face and everything. But yeah, that original Jetfire figure that I think all 3 of us had at some point was literally a Robotech Veritech fighter.
He was, and so some of these vehicles they could fit in. I'm going to talk about one of them specifically towards the end, and then some of them were just standalone robots. I did want to point out too that not all of the Zentradi were 6 inches. Some of the Zentradi were 3 3/4, which kind of frustrated me. Yeah. I'm like, they're supposed to be bigger. Yeah. What's going on? They don't match up. And as we've talked about on other episodes where we talk about the toys, I have an issue with scale. If you're gonna make a Transformer, make him really freaking huge versus the G.I. Joe, which should be a lot smaller. Anyways,
it's really the point. It's the point of this one.
It's a big deal.
Yeah,
it is a big deal. Yeah, and the fact that they didn't match up wasn't cool. But a couple things that I loved. One, this figure line included female characters, which was not commonplace. I know G.I. Joe had a few. If you go all the way back to Buck Rogers, I think they even made a couple female Buck Rogers figures.
Did they make a Wilma figure?
Yeah,
they did make a Wilma figure, but it wasn't, female figures didn't sell well. According to, if you look at any of the toy documentaries, they always talk about boys don't buy female figures. Well, I mean, still, but it's nice to have the whole collection. It was nice to have a Lisa Hayes and a Dana Sterling. But one vehicle and figure in particular that I loved was the Armored Cyclone.
Yes.
Motorcycle.
Yes.
And so there were 2 versions of that. One came with a Scott Bernard figure, which was, I guess, more rare. And you could buy the Scott Bernard figure separate. and he was one of my favorite characters too, by the way. Or you could buy the standalone Cyclone, which I had. And the beautiful thing about these 3 3/4 figures is they matched up with G.I. Joe. So you could put, Snake Eyes on the Cyclone motorcycle riding around. And I had that forever. I had the special set of G.I. Joes that I custom made, and I lost them all. But if you go on eBay now, like that Cyclone, that's one of my holy grail toys that I'll have to own down the road is a original Cyclone, because that motorcycle was dope. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Diallo, I believe that was from the New Generation.
Yeah.
That's when Scott Bernard came out. So,
Yeah.
They toe dipped into all 3 Robotech series in America. And so that's the Matchbox line in a nutshell.
Can I call out the playset though? I thought.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say,
I blanked. Yeah.
And it's the reason I'm bringing it up is because Corey has a very specific thing that he loves when it comes to this sort of thing. I love hangers. As a kid, there would be a model store near me, and this was older, so there was like more prevalent Robotech stuff then, and I would love it, or Gundam, even Gundam stuff. I love it when people actually make the hangers for the mechs as well, and even show like the armaments and everything. So as a kid, I thought it was really cool that they even made the SD1, like it's almost like a hangar where you could refuel the Veritech fighter in it and everything like that. But yeah, elaborate on that one, Zach.
Yeah, so that last but obviously not least, and I think some people complain because it wasn't as big as the flag, the G.I. Joe flag, but nothing else is as big as the G.I. Joe flag.
I mean, the SD1 would have 2 flags, one on each arm, essentially.
Yeah. You'd have to buy it in 3 installments, and and I don't think any parent is going to do that for their kid, no matter how rad they are. But the SDF1 playset was like a section of the playset. Yeah. And it's really cool looking. Apparently that's a holy grail toy to get because it's really hard to come by. But the figures could fit on it. Yeah. The mechs could fit on it. It looked really cool. I'm a sucker for playsets. I don't care. I know the Sectars playset was just literally just a big gray like beehive looking thing. That thing was badass. Playsets, that's another thing that kills me. Like, thank God Mattel's releasing playsets again. The Castle Grayskull is a badass playset. Playsets are awesome.
Yeah, they are.
So just as a kid, don't think about it as an adult, but as a kid, your mind totally transforms that playset into a whole world, right? And so I never saw the SDF1 playset in the wild, but if you go online, you can find pictures of it. I know toyarchive.com has some great images of it. It's really a thing of beauty. So God bless Matchbox for doing more than just freaking little cars, because they released a pretty damn good toy line back in the 80s. And it didn't last that long, and you could find them on toy shelves half off at KB toy stores. And now you go on eBay, and they're quadruple the price.
Man, if only we had a time machine, all 3 of us would just buy toys pretty much.
Kids these days. Oh, I will say really quickly, I think it's Toynami. Toynami is a toy line. They release a line of 3 3/4 Robotech figures that are cartoon accurate. So these figures did not look. They came close. The helmets were badass for the characters, and that's what mattered to me. But the minute you take the helmet off of Roy Foker's head, he looks like a melted version of Roy Foker.
He doesn't have the awesome hair and everything,
Yeah, but the toy line that Toynami put out, and they're pretty pricey as well. I think the cheapest figure is like $25 or $30. They put out a bunch of figures from the toy line, and like Max Sterling, Roy Foker, Rick Hunter, et cetera, et cetera. They're pretty badass. They look just like they do in the cartoon, and you can find those on Amazon and eBay as well, I think.
Well, before we get into like sort of our nostalgic discussion of the Matchbox toys, I will just say that I only had a handful of them. I never had any of them new. I got them just secondhand or at the secondhand store or whatever. I was never quite into them because what I wanted was the transforming Veritech, and I had it. It was Jetfire. So I kind of just I never had any of the 3 3/4 toys, although it is kind of cool that a G.I. Joe figure could fit into the I think it was the Skull Squadron was the jet.
It was.
Right, yeah.
It was cool looking.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool
I
looking.
just wish it transformed. So
Right.
for me, I kind of only had a handful of them. I don't know specifically which ones, but I never went out of my way for them because it's just I wanted a Veritech. And as I got older, you started finding, like once anime stuff becomes more and more prevalent in the 90s and everything, you realize that there's all kinds of models and Veritech models you can buy and everything, but I never had any of those either. So one of the things that I'm looking for over in Japan is Robotech stuff, even though it's not called Robotech over there. I'm going to have to look for Macross, and it's kind of weird because my love for this franchise is the American version, but I still want a Veritech fighter so bad. Diallo, what experience with the toys? Did you have these Matchbox figures?
No, I didn't have any of them. I remember seeing them in like catalogs and stuff, and I was kind of dismissive of them because they didn't look. I don't know. They just didn't look like as cool as I thought they should be. And I think it, like you were saying, like because they didn't, like the Veritech didn't transform, and to me, it's like, then what's the point? There used to be a mall at shout out to Ceremony in Daly City. There used to be a metal model shop there, or maybe it was a toy store. But they had, it was like KB's, but they used to have a ton of those BattleTech models, and I would just kind of peruse those a lot. I might have bought one, and I do remember getting a Veritech model. It was the Max Sterling's blue Veritech, and I remember building that and putting that together one day. But yeah, for the most part, I didn't really. I did have the Cyclone, Scott Bernard Cyclone, but it was like a big figure. It was like fully transformable, and I actually think it was from overseas. Somehow it ended up like at a Long's Drugs on the shelf, and I remember like it was on the shelf, and it was like $35, and I didn't have the money, and I hid it behind something. And
you would do that. You would hide things back in the day.
Yeah, and then I like got enough money for it, and it came back, and then I got it. So I had that for a while, and I gave it to a cousin. So back in the day. So
the helmet didn't come off though. Like
I think it slid up and down. I think, but it didn't come off. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it's still cool. It was still awesome.
Yeah,
looking.
but the rest of it, the motorcycle came apart and the wheels went up on the shoulders, and like there's like rocket launchers on the hubs of the motorcycle, and they come in and they go up on his wrists and stuff. So I did have that, and then that was kind of it for me. I never had what's a Skyfire for the Transformers, and I got
Jetfire.
Jetfire, yeah. And I remember getting it actually at PowerCon with Zach or Boat. I think that time you guys won. And I saw it and I had the money. I was like, oh man, I always wanted this figure. And because I knew it was the Robotech figure, I got that. It was between that or $6 Million Man, which I used to have as a kid, and I got the Jetfire. So anyways, that's like the closest I've ever had to any of that. And I remember like in 99, 2000, they had a whole series of toys that came out from overseas. And I think it was called like the Robotech Perfect Collection or something like that. And they had like all of they were like highly detailed Veritechs, not just like Veritech fighters, but like the Alpha fighters from New Generation. But they were like, each one was like $100, and but I kicked myself for never getting them though. I should have got them. But that's kind of like my experience with the toys anyway.
Well, we know what Corey's going to be doing when he goes to Japan, looking for Robotech toys for Diallo and I.
That's right. Zach, which ones, you said you made some custom G.I. Joes and stuff like that, but did you have any of the actual figures, the Matchbox stuff?
Yeah, I had the Cyclone, and, look, like, when you go to the toy store, you only had enough money to choose between a G.I. Joe figure or a Robotech figure or an Inhumanoid or et cetera, et cetera. So I think I wanted like I wanted Rick, I wanted Roy, I wanted like the dudes, because I was one of those kids where I'm like, I don't want the girl figure. Now I look at him like I should have got the girl figures, because who cares? And but I think I had Rick and Roy, and I wanted Scott, but he was never around. I had that Cyclone cycle though, and that Cyclone cycle lived rent free in my imagination, in my world, and in my whole, it was everything to me. I think that was one of my favorite vehicles to own because the tires were rubber. And so it gripped the ground really well. And it stood up, it didn't need a kickstand or anything. It like kind of could stand alone on its own. And it was just badass. And so, yeah, the figures, like, they never were all that great. But let's be honest, some of those G.I. Joe figures, Duke had the stupidest look on his face. Yeah. With that big grin. Like, man, that is the lamest looking figure. He's supposed to be the hero, and he's the dorkiest one in the bunch. It's true. And now, like, I look at those Toynami ones, and I'm like, man, I really want to own those, because they're really cool looking. Mm-hmm. Fully posable, points of articulation. It's like the figures we wish we had back then. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and then they became they were just gone. You couldn't find them anymore. And I remember Diallo, Long's is literally, for those that don't know, Long's is like a CVS or Walgreens, and you would hide a toy. You could, you find places either under the shelf or behind a bunch of toys, and you go back hoping it was still there. And they also had a thing called layaway back in the day, ladies and gentlemen, where you can put down a little bit of money and they'd hold it for you. So, yeah, this era is gone. It's such a shame that illusion of the whole notion of waiting and finding out what happens next week. That's just gone now. We don't have that anymore because it's all out there.
They binge it.
People binge
the
everything,
motherfucker. You just watch right next.
It's fine. Like
next episode, now.
I binge too, but the idea of like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to wait to find out what happens to this character that I love so much. Recaps don't really matter anymore. That's why they have the skip button on those things, But you kids, like back then, we didn't have that, and so I think that's why this show is so nostalgically special. Because even though the American version is obviously cut up and edited and different than the Japanese original version, it's still super special to, I think, people who watched back in the day like us, and it created we're still talking about it 40 years later,
I mean, in watching it now, like, I love the way, the helmets look. I think their helmets look awesome. I love the way their suits look. Of course, the Veritech fighters based on, like, the Tomcat jet like you see in the very first Top Gun. And yes, of course, we all know when Hollywood makes this movie that they've been trying to make for like 30 years, a live action Robotech, they're not going to use a Tomcat, and thus they're going to waste any kind of nostalgic tinge they could have had, because dude, Diallo, at the end of the day, man, the Tomcat is the Veritech fighter,
right? Yeah, they're gonna they're gonna do it.
They're gonna just make some new generic fighter, and guess what? It will not be iconic. Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Hello, and welcome to BAMPIRE. BAMPIRE is a wildly ambitious, independent horror comedy film.
It is fun, sexy, thrilling, and unpredictable from start to finish.
On the surface, Vampire is a slasher flick set in the 90s.
References Bambi, but it's not just, Bambi, but horror. It's its own thing, and it has a real story to tell.
Vampire is a story that I wrote to encapsulate my own experience growing up in the wilds of Alaska, seeing humankind interact with nature.
So to me, Vampire is just like a fantastic horror comedy, just like a classic kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, early Scream era.
It's also a gore fest that will make you wonder if we took the actors back there and really mauled them like that.
It is going to be so wildly entertaining.
It's visceral. It's energetic, it's emotional, it's popcorn, it's candy. It feels like watching a movie. It's a movie.
And now, back to the show. So Diallo, the conversation's going to kind of go in any sort of direction. We're, at this point, we have the groundwork, guys and gals. We can come back to toys, we can come back to the cartoon and everything, but I do want to talk about where the series sort of goes. So my experience, I'll just tell you now, I used to read the Malibu Comics miniseries. I still
Oh,
have.
yeah.
I still have every issue of Robotech: The Malcontent Uprising. As a
yeah.
kid, I didn't know what the word malcontent meant, but I have every issue of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diallo. Didn't the Zentradi get shrunk down to human form?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had those comics, so I was aware that there was like story that continued past, and I never even finished like the main series. Like I only ever had knowledge of were those VHS tapes that I sort of rented as a kid. And then also, it's a vivid memory in my head. I'm guessing, so I was 7, guessing I was 8. Diallo, when did the like Robotech novels start hitting roughly?
I don't, I remember getting them in my, maybe like my junior, senior year of high school. So that would have been like 87 through 89, up until 90 and a little bit later. But I don't know exactly when it came out.
That makes sense because I have a very vivid memory of being at the grocery store, and back in the 80s, moms would just leave their kid in like the book aisle or the comic book aisle or whatever. And I love this one cover for a random and I'm sure Diallo has it in his collection of Robotech books. But
I'm thumbing through right now.
I
this
can see it.
1987 is when the first book came out.
Okay, so I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and I asked my mom for this Robotech book. Again, it was probably, who knows what entry in the series it was. I don't think it was like number 1. But she was like, oh, I'm only going to get it for you if you can read me like the first page or first paragraph or something like that. So I remember being in the store, in the grocery store, actually reading it to her, and then she bought it for me, and I read I couldn't tell you anything about it, but I read the whole thing, and it was a novel. Diallo has a whole stack of them. So those are kind of like, and then video games, like that was kind of like moving forward. There was like a PS1 video game, but I feel like they never quite got the Robotech game right. There's never been one definitive awesome Robotech game, so I was still engaging with the franchise as I moved past the Macross series. But Diallo, where did the series go after Macross?
So out of the original Robotech, they're sort of like seeds planted in the new generation part with the Invid, where like Rick Hunter and the SDF-3, not the SDF-1, are
or 2.
Or 2 are off somewhere, and they're trying to get back to Earth at the end. And so they had this whole other series that they called the Sentinels. That group, there's like a group of Rick, Lisa, and then some other characters. They build the SDF-3 with the Britai from Zentradi and some other characters, and they go off to I can't even remember exactly what they were doing. They were trying to find the Robotech Masters or some, I forget exactly what it was. But they go out there, and then there's a whole other story. So they started to actually make it as an animated series, and I think they only did like 3 or 4 episodes in that, and then it got, the story is that like the yin crashed and they couldn't continue, but I don't think that that's the real story. I just think with rights and everything, it didn't happen. So they eventually crunched those into like a movie that I used to have like on VHS, but then the book series actually took those notes, and the same writer from the regular Robotech, Jack McKinney, he wrote the Sentinel series. So it's actually written and complete. And then he actually wrote like a last book that ties everything together, and it was called The End of the Circle. That came out in like the early 90s, I think. That ties the whole Robotech story together. And they actually had, maybe in the early 2000s, they had another show called Robotech Shadow Chronicles. It was actually pretty good, I remember. And it had like what happened with Rick Bernard and stuff after the Invid and stuff. So that's like the Robotech side. And then like Macross itself, actually, like in Japan, that actually had sequels too. So I think the next one was Macross 2,
So just so we're all aware, yes, Robotech is an amalgamation of other things, but it went in its own direction in America, but also at the same time, Macross went in its own direction in Japan. So even though they have this weird connection, they kind of diverge, right?
Right. Yeah. So Robotech always, like, whenever Robotech did anything, it was always like all the series elements of all three to a whole different storyline. But Robotech was just like, if you finish, Macross series, if you just have Macross, it goes from there, right? So it only takes into account the Macross story. So it has,
and Macross is SDF1. Macross is Rick, Roy, Lisa.
Yeah.
These are all in the Japanese version of Macross. The Veritech fighters, these are all in Macross.
Right. Yeah. So they had Macross 2. They had one called Macross 0, I think, and then the best one. I think they've had plenty more since, but the best one to me that I saw, it's kind of the last thing I really saw, and this was like the late 90s. It was, I think it was Macross Plus. It was really good. I think it was like a 3 or 4 episode series, and it was actually directed by Shinichiro Wanatabe, who is, I think he was co-directed by that, and it was his first kind of like feature-ish kind of thing, and he actually went on to do Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, wow.
Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo. So that's sort of like the caliber of what this is, and it recreates a lot of the magic, but like really and the drama that the original Macross had, and it but updates it, and it's none of the characters from the original. It's like each one has different characters, so it's like it just moves down in a timeline from the original story.
So what is that one movie? Is it like called like Macross Love is
Macross,
Divine or something?
Yeah, Macross Remember Love. So that's basically like, yeah.
Is that connected to Macross, or is that connected to Robotech, the American?
It's connected to Macross.
Okay.
And it's basically just like a movie version of the entire series. It's a lot more like, adult and intense. There, and I actually, because I have all this music. I actually have some of the music from that, so it's like different music. Min-Mei character sings this Macross Remember Love or something. It's like I Love You So or something. This song that she sings to make the Zentradi freak out versus the one that they sing in Robotech. But yeah, that's just like, it's sort of like better animation, more intense, and they did that. I've seen that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I've seen that a few times where they'll do like a completely updated like movie version of a series or something, and it doesn't really change it significantly, but it's kind of all wrapped up in one.
But it's all like new animation. They didn't just cobble together existing animation to make the movie.
Yeah.
They took existing ideas and stories, but made all new animation for it.
Yeah, I believe so. I've never actually watched the entire thing. I've seen like large clips of it. And then like, scenes with Min-Mei singing and stuff. But yeah, it's a whole new thing, I should say.
Zach, do you have any familiarity with this stuff outside of the Harmony Gold Robotech stuff?
I really don't. So, I think at one point, maybe 10 years ago, I was at a con and they were doing a screening of Macross episodes, and I remember going in to a screening room and watching it and not being confused, but just being like, wow, I never saw any of this. This doesn't ring any bells to me. So, and then that, I think it was maybe, I want to say in the 90s when I started, mid to late 90s, when I started realizing there was more to this saga, this universe than what I just saw back in the day as a kid. And I didn't understand how expansive it was, And really quickly, you touched upon the video games. I believe Nintendo put one out too. That wasn't good. It wasn't a good adaptation. So I think that's desperately needed too, where I think it was like literally just like the Veritech fighter like, in that position where the legs are down, but the ship is still
Guardian mode.
Position.
That's what we call Guardian mode, Zach.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Guardian mode, sorry. I think the figure was in Guardian mode the entire time, and you just basically blasted stuff, and it was cool, but there was really no like storyline to it. So anyways, my familiarity with it post American is like it's zero. Not zero, but it's
Zach, you
small.
kind of popped a little bit when I mentioned the Malibu comics, or was that just because you remember the Malibu imprint?
No, you're right. Thanks for reminding me. I did have those. Malibu comics. I had a couple issues of that, and so again, I think I got them more for nostalgic purposes. I don't even remember necessarily reading them. My God, do you remember like comics would come out on like a Wednesday or a Thursday or something like that, and you go, or maybe it was Friday. Anyways, I would get every issue that I could get my hands on because I just love to look at the art more than anything else.
Me too. I mean, I had all of them, like I said, of the Malibu ones, but I didn't. I didn't kind of go past that one of the Malcontent Uprising. I don't know why. Probably just money, I imagine, or something. Or
right.
I was looking more for. Maybe I was reading more Dirty Pair at the time because it had more boobs in it and everything.
I did not know about Dirty Pair until you sent me a little recap of Robotech stuff, and I'm like, oh, Dirty Pair, that looks
that was fun.
That looks
Dirty
nasty.
Pair was fun. No, it was good. It was good shit.
My brother, I'm sure, got that.
Diallo, I'm gonna ask you something, and it's gonna make me sound stupid, but I got to do it. So on this Blu-ray, this Macross, Part 1, Robotech Part 1, the Macross Saga. I've not had a chance to watch it all yet, but does this have any of those other two series in it, or is that literally would that be a separate Blu-ray series essentially?
Probably. I mean, I've not. It probably would be completely separate if it says Macross Saga. So basically, Macross Saga, when it ends, like it, when they start the Southern Cross series, there's no, because they were completely, in reality, they were two different series completely. So they don't really do. There's no transition. It's like, it's actually, I think it's 15 to 16 years later.
Okay.
Yeah. So the kid in Maximilia's kid in Macross ends up growing up to be the main character in Southern Cross, Dana Sterling.
And the cool, so the thing is like Southern Cross, what would we say? The American version is Macross is the first one. The second one is the Robotech Masters, and then the Sentinels. But I remember reading in the Malibu comics, like the term Southern Cross came up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was kind of a reference to the original anime then?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I almost, in my head, I think I just said it. I kind of always refer to it as Southern Cross.
Yeah.
And I think that was the name of their regiment in the Robotech version.
Okay. Is that funny. A way of them bringing the name sort of into it, essentially?
Yeah. And it's funny because Southern Cross is definitely like the least resonant of the three. It doesn't do very much. It's like a lot of the episodes are just that little group of I think they were like the 15th or whatever cavalry or whatever. They spend a lot of time doing these raids on the Robotech Master ship and escaping and and it's kind of weird. You kind of don't know what's going on with it. Are
these the ones on the bikes that transform, or is that them? Is that Southern
No,
Cross?
that's new. That's the new generation. That's
Okay.
the Genesis Climber one that you were talking about.
Okay.
This one is they do have these hover motorcycles in Southern Cross Robotech Masters, but they have like these tanks that transform, which were pretty cool. I didn't like their helmets because they had like these wings on them or something. They look kind of weird. And they had all these other little transforming jets and stuff too that were actually kind of cool. But yeah, it's the least liked, I think, pretty universally of the three. I low key, actually, I don't like the Genesis Climber better, but I low key like I really like it. Like I actually really was obsessed with those episodes actually. So the ones with the transforming motorcycles and the Invid, and
this would be the Sentinel series then.
No, the Sentinel series is completely different. That's after everything. So that's like a tag on after but it's not a part of the original Robotech. But the motorcycles, it's the new generation, the Genesis Climber. Those are that's the ones. That's the one with Scott Bernard, and they have the Alpha Fighters and the motorcycles that transform, and they fight the Invid, and there's I really absolutely love that story, and it has like a cross-dressing character that like today people would say is woke. But back then it was just like on TV, and it was like, oh, that's happening, and you just kept moving,
like the dude on MASH.
Yeah. Are the Alpha Fighters? Are those the ones that have they're bigger jets, and they kind of have that wing in the front by the cockpit? It's kind of almost got like two sets of wings, and there's one because I remember,
think so. They had like really big thrusters in the back, and they look more space.
Yeah,
they look more science fiction.
Yeah,
but they're really cool, and they had this thing called like the Beta Fighter, which was another ship that could latch on to the back that would like boost them up or something too.
Yeah, I remember all that, and I remember being like, those look like. I remember I think the animation was a lot better on those later ones and everything. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking they were really cool. But at the same time, even though I didn't, use the term iconic, at the same time I was like, but it's no Veritech fighter, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I still thought they looked really neat. And by that point, by the time that I was already seeing those, like I feel like the toys and the models were more prevalent and easier to get a hold of at that point as well.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely are. The Veritechs are. That's iconic.
That's the gold standard.
Like you'll never beat it, but the Veritech, I mean the Alpha Fighters were pretty cool. Were pretty cool looking.
That's the Harmony gold standard. But by the way, every time you guys were saying Southern Cross, I couldn't get that I got that Crosby, Stills, Nash song stuck in my head. And a Southern Cross. Dun, 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 dun.
I don't know.
I don't know it.
You don't know Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills, Nash?
Maybe.
No,
it's possible.
Stephen Stills is singing.
I was
in a Southern
too
Cross.
busy listening to Usher.
I'm telling you right now, I mentioned that, people are going to be like, yeah, I know that song.
No, I'm sorry, Zach. I wish I did.
Stephen Stills, yo.
Zach's like, I've
heard of them. I know who they are.
Yeah. I liked them when they were Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Hey, no, how's it go? Think about how many times I have fallen. Spirits are using me. Larger voices calling. You know that song?
No.
I've been around the world looking for that woman, girl.
Zach's like, I'm gonna fade away into the background now.
Nope.
Back to Robotech.
One guy listening to this is like, yeah, that's why I listen to TV Obscura, because they bring up Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young.
It's probably David Ullman.
Why is he why does he have like a Southern accent?
Well, it's Southern Cross.
Because of Southern Cross.
Diallo, what of the? I'm sorry, Zach. I don't know where to go from that, but I'm gonna go back to Robotech. Is what I'm gonna do. Zach he hung his head low. Diallo,
one tin soldier crying.
What was your favorite of the three arcs? What was your favorite?
I mean, Macross. Macross hands down is like the best of them. Like. I think it's the only one that like just even continued it even in Japan. But again, I really like the new generation one with the motorcycle. Like it's such a great, because the premise in Robotech is that they're coming back to liberate Earth from the Invid that attack in the beginning, and the entire expeditionary force is destroyed except for one ship, with Scott Bernard's ship, and he crashes. And then the whole thing is about him trying to get to this place called Reflex Point and trying to get wait for like the SDF-3 to come back, but he picks up a band of people along the way that become his team, and they're just always on the run. And like the Invid are scary looking. Like it gives me like a sense of terror, like just when I look at them and I see them, and just knowing that there's no real escape. And then it's kind of like a little episodic because they go from town to town and they're hiding out and they're trying to do stuff, and they encounter all these different people that are under siege themselves. And you see like there's one really cool episode, this guy Colonel Wolf, I actually think he ends up being in the Sentinels, but he was like a old warrior, and then he's like basically has been selling out the humans to lure them into the Invid. So like he was once this great war hero, but now he's like, or you have Lancer / Yellow Dancers. I was talking about the cross-dresser. So he's like, he goes from town to town dressed as like this pop star. So like so that's how they get into some of these places, because it's like, oh, Yellow Dancer's coming and doing a concert, and everybody's like excited, but it's really like this guy, you know. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. And like I remember Rook, Rook Bartley is her name. She like, I remember her character. I was started to realize how I really resonate with strong female characters, and that, you know, as a young person, that was kind of like, oh, I noticed that about myself. So yeah, I really like that arc. But Macross is just like, it's so great. There's so many things that happen in it. It's like it's this ship that like they don't know what it does. Really.
Well, even as a kid, I loved it when they first turn on the gravity drive in like the second episode or something, and then the gravity drives just rip themselves out of the ship and just go up into the air. Good. I was like, that was clever. Like I thought that was, even as a kid, I was like, that's clever. I that's cool. And then the fact that when they did jump, and they took a part of the island, you know, with them, I was like, that is so cool. As a kid, I thought it was cool, but now I'm watching it now as an adult, and like you said, Diallo, it's like, oh yeah, you've got this technology that you don't really know what it does, because it's not fucking human. You know, wasn't designed by humans. They just retrofitted it, and I just thought those were cool little scenarios that kind of happened. You know.
Yeah, like they were gonna do a test, and no pressure, but then they get attacked, so they have to do half of this stuff, and then they end up, you know, jumping, and then they find out that they're like past Pluto or whatever, and then it's like, oh, now we got to get home, and then it's like that whole battle, and it's just they're discovering things along the way, right? They're like, you know, like, oh, we can use our shields this way, we can use our shields that way, and then they find out other ways to use shields, and then some people die, and then it's just, you know, and then the whole Earth, like, and then there's the part where they have to fight like 100 million Zentradi ships in orbit, and it's just my brain, it's like it goes in so many directions. It's so good.
I think too, I to piggyback on the one little comment you made about characters dying, you know, this show, and I dare I say, I think there may be an audience of ours that maybe has never seen the series all the way through, so I don't want to necessarily spoil any major plot points. But when a major character dies and it's a shock, like to this day, that stayed with me. I remember watching that live. I remember watching that as a kid on TV and going like, no, like that, what? You can't, but that's, is this a dream? You know, like this is not real. And it freaked me the hell out, and in a good way. Like that kind of level of drama is still not necessarily matched with cartoons of you know, American cartoons.
Well, the funny thing is, I'm one of those people who have not seen it all the way through. I don't know who you're talking about, and now I am both intrigued and scared at the same time.
Well, so I'm sorry, and you're welcome, because I mean, I haven't watched the series in forever. I actually earlier today ordered it as well from Amazon.
Yay!
And so I will be, so maybe, when Corey will fly down to Los Angeles just to watch Robotech with Diallo and I.
Oh, that would be absolutely amazing. Now, Diallo, it's funny when you were talking about all these things, like, man, I was getting so many different shades of like Star Trek Voyager. They tell, they get transported and they have to come back. I had some other, some Battlestar Galactica themes. And I had like another one that was different as well, but now I can't remember what it is. But man, it just makes me realize how influential I imagine this cartoon was on writers of sci-fi nowadays.
Yeah, when I was watching Battlestar, the reimagined version, especially after they got to New Caprica and little Hera was born, I was talking to my friend about it. I was like, this is just like Robotech. Like, this is just like Robotech, this whole deal with the kid and blah, 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 and what it means. And yeah, it was. And so I kind of knew, I kind of suspected where Battlestar was going to go just from knowing where Robotech went with all that stuff. So yeah, it definitely has it's so influential. And it's really weird because it's almost like it can fit on this podcast about TV Obscura, because even though it is very, like, well, you can like talk to like so many people say Robotech, but it's like, where have you seen it since it went off the air? Like, it's like, it just kind of like it was here and then it was just gone. And I think a lot of that has to do with like rights and stuff that are tied up. And like that's why another reason why a lot of people don't like Harmony Gold, but it is like I have these books, right? Like, so when I was in high school, I discovered they had the books, and there are 20, there's a lot of them. And
when you say books, when you say books, you're referring to chapter books.
Yeah, novelizations of but they really actually, they were really good because it came out a few years after like Robotech came out in 84, 85.
85. It actually premiered in the States in March of 85.
Perfect timing. Okay.
It is perfect timing.
Yeah.
And I only know that because I referenced it in the previous episode of Territory Marks. Paul London had never seen Robotech.
Oh.
So,
wow.
So he got it confused with something else. And I'm like, it dropped March 4th, I believe, of 85.
Wow. And that's rare. Paul's pretty knowledgeable about a lot of pop culture stuff from the 80s.
Yeah,
he is. But he's a little bit younger than us, so I think he was watching other cartoons at the time.
Okay,
but yeah, so I had watched Robotech extensively, in those 2 years, and knew it really well. And then the books came out, so I read and I bought the first book, whatever. And what I discovered is that the novelizations actually kind of fill in a lot of gaps. They have like one thing I really love about the first book is it actually has this whole sequence of what they did when after the ship, after the SDF-1 crashed on Earth. They have a whole team going in, just like trying to figure out like what was going on. It's very militaristic, and they introduce some characters and expand on some of that as it goes through.
I have an oversized. I mean, I'm you literally, as you're talking, I'm getting like treadstoned, like just like it's flooding back to me. I had an oversized Robotech comic book, but it wasn't a comic book. It was like thicker than a comic and everything like that. And it got into what we saw in the cartoon, but there was a large chunk of it showed that when it first crashed and this military team went to investigate, like people died in it, like people got killed by the defenses, like by its internal defenses. But holy shit, like I remember that. I remember as a kid, I was like, oh my God, this was cool because it's not in the cartoon. But then it kind of starts getting into what the cartoon gets into. That's really cool that it's also in the novelization. So maybe then was that then in the original Macross series, I imagine?
I don't think it. I've seen, because for a second, Macross was like on Netflix some years ago,
like the original Macross, right?
Yeah, the original Macross. Yeah, and I was watching it on there, just because I wanted to see what the differences were, and that wasn't there. I do remember I I do remember that the opening sequence when the SDF-1 crashes, there was a lot more like scenes of violence because there was like a war going on. It's actually interesting because in the Robotech one there was a war, and then SDF-1 crashes and it makes everybody stop fighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was in the comic as well. It was, there was an entire world war happening, but then when this happened, the world came together to work on this project of repairing it's like, which you sort of get some of that in the beginning first episode of Robotech, but I mean, I think that's such a big concept and a big thing. I wish they had sort of elaborated on that further.
That was the first time I ever even contemplated that concept of like, and they talk about it in The Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole.
That's the point of The Watchmen. That's
the
of
point of
Ozymandias' whole fucking thing.
Yeah. But in the original Macross, actually, and I'm pretty sure of this, it actually is like kind of reversed. So the SDF-1 crashes, and then there's a war because they're fighting for who gets to control the ship. And so those scenes that you see of war are described differently in both of them. Yeah. But the results sort of like the same. They just come to a truce or whatever, and then they end up having a unified Robotech Defense Force, they call it. And they don't call it Robotech Defense Force in the original Macross, but it's the same kind of idea. Yeah.
What I love about that too is sometimes novelizations or novel continuations from a series don't always connect directly. Like it'll be an offshoot or I hate using this term, but like multiverse, something else going on at the same time. But the fact that it gives more of a backstory, it's a perfect companion piece to it versus it just being like, oh, this is a nice extra thing for it. You can get a lot more depth and detail thanks to these books, which is really rad.
Yeah, in the books, especially those first like 5 that deal with Macross, a lot of it is them sort of there's a character that you actually see in the cartoon, but he's super brief, and he's Dr. Lang, and he kind of tells like, oh yeah, we don't have we don't have an engine anymore or whatever, or like the gravity things are gone or whatever.
Oh yeah, when they did when they folded time or jumped, it was gone. The FTL drive just disappeared. I love that. It just
disappears. Yeah, and I think Dr. Lang is the one that says it, but in the book he actually has a bigger role to play. He was actually in that first group of people that like explored the ship. And he like something happened to him, like computer something or so. So he kind of like was tapped into like the Robotech stuff, but he didn't really know. But he didn't know the nature of all of it. But he had like intuitively was the one that built all of the systems and machines, and so he played a bigger part in the story because he could describe like all the things that you actually see in the cartoon. It just was a little bit more in depth, and he was like the character that did a lot of that stuff. So
cool.
It was like, so the books actually were really like, I was so into them. I used to like I knew a new one was coming out the next week, and I had my little job or whatever, and like I had my money, and I would go like on a Saturday, I would go cash my check, and then I would run down to the bookstore, and then I would buy the new book, and I'd go down every week to wait for the new book to come out, and and I just have all of them. It's like the one thing. It's like a lot of the things that like I had, like all my toys are gone because like my parents were just very invested in throwing my things away.
Yeah, you and I can relate to that. Like, why are you throwing all my stuff away?
Yeah, it's like I'd always be like, just say, why do you have to just keep it in the box, But the books, like maybe because they're books, they left them alone. So I still have all of my books. There's these books that came out called Robotech Art 1, and they have Art 2 and Art 3. Art 2 is pretty rare, I think. But Robotech Art 1 is basically, it's like a really thick book, and it has each episode of the series, and then it has a whole section in the back like character sketches, and then it actually talks about like sort of like the history of anime and how it ended and how Macross or Robotech ended up in the United States. So it tells that whole story.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then they have Robotech Art 3. I've seen Robotech Art 2 because I remember I had a friend had it, but I can't really remember what was in it. But then Robotech Art 3 is about the Sentinels. And so it has all the stuff from that show that never really got off the ground. So yeah, I even have like music. They had like a CD of it back in the late 80s. I had that. There was like a Robotech fan club. I wasn't in that because I was too cool.
I remember the fan club.
Yeah.
I remember seeing advertisements for that.
Yeah. And they even had music from the I think Min Mei and I forget the other character. She was a pretty big character, but she I think it's like Sophia or something. But anyways, they have like a wedding song that they sing for like Rick and Lisa. Yeah. So it just there's I like Robotech a lot.
If this series came out today, if this series had just come out within, this decade, we would have pop concerts with the characters singing like we do with the gorillas, where the animation's playing on the screen and the performers are behind the screen. That would be huge today if it came out today.
Yeah.
That would be bigger than BTS.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. The way you're kind of talking about with the gorillas is actually an advanced version of that is what Macross Plus was. So there was a pop singer, but it was like this computer like animated singer, like AI or something like that, which recreated the Min Mei stuff. So
interesting.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Now, Zach, you said Bodhi has seen this, right? So did you guys watch like the original Robotech series? How far did you guys get into it?
Oh, we just watched the Christmas episode because we
Okay.
were, every Christmas we watch nostalgic Christmas episodes, and I know we had talked about potentially doing that one. We didn't cover it. We will cover it soon. I know we will. So I won't spoil anything. But he loved it. He was like, whoa, because there's a lot of destruction in that episode, and you don't see people dying.
Zach's like, there's a lot of destruction in that episode.
There was a lot of and Bodhi at this is such an interesting kid because like well, I'm sure his age, it's normal for kids his age, but like he's really into the destruction aspect of things, and then he jokes around, but like things getting killed or things getting blown up, and especially in Pokemon, everyone faints, no one dies.
Of course.
Which I'm like, dude, there's an A-bomb explosion going off thanks to Pikachu and this other Amaroj or whatever that he's battling. And I'm like, that would just obliterate everyone. He's like, I know. He's like, but they fainted. They're okay. I'm like, okay. Well, in Robotech, everyone dies when there's an explosion. Everyone dies.
When you get this Blu-ray, are you going to show him the
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I think the reason, and I brought it up earlier, I think the reason why I'm eager to bring it, the reason why I'm eager to show him the series is because he's so into Pokemon now, and the storylines are not like lame or stupid to him. He laughs at certain things that are silly. I think he'll do the same with the Robotech series. I think there's definitely characters that you'll laugh at, but it doesn't take away from the drama and the compelling storyline.
He's 10 now, right?
He's 9, almost 10.
Okay.
So,
but that's
I think he'll
that's
be into it.
I mean, that's when I was watching Robotech essentially for the first time.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's so weird that I keep bringing up Pokemon because it's that style, like it just reminds me of that in the silly characters, those random silly characters, like Lunk, for example. It's like I love that character. It was cool back in the day. I didn't know why I liked it, but I did. And you guys brought up Robotech earlier, or not Robotech. You guys brought up Voltron as well. I watched Voltron a little bit, and I think I had some of the figures back then, but I was never really into Voltron, I think, because the cartoon was not compelling like Robotech was.
Same, dude. I had a Voltron toy, And like I would say, like I like Voltron, but I think I say it now because I remember it and I experienced it. But I don't. I really I liked the other Voltron a little bit more, the car one. I thought that was cooler.
That is sacrilege, but I agree.
I know, and the funny thing is, I think all three of us feel the same way. But I couldn't tell you what the characters were for the car version. Like for the lion version, like those characters are burned into my brain. But I remember liking the car version better. Now, all that being said, Myra watched the Netflix Voltron, and I caught like bits and pieces of it here and there. That thing looked absolutely amazing.
It is I love that show so much. It took the core concept and it just made a full story, and with the emotional ups and downs and discovery, and I love that series so much. If you ever get a chance to watch the whole thing,
I would like to. It's kind of hard to watch if I'm not watching it with her. I kind of have a hard time watching it. But what I saw, I was astutely aware that I was like, this is how you do it. This is how you you reboot something.
Yeah. I will say really quickly too, because I think that's in our queue to watch at some point down the road. But I think, and again, I only call it an American cartoon because it was broadcast in America, but something like, I feel like Thundercats, Silverhawks tried to capture elements of like fantasy space and drama, but those shows never hooked you like this show did. I feel like the opening animation, to those shows was always so beautiful, but then you watch the show and you're like, meh, it's okay. Like, I don't think that the three of us could remember more than maybe one or two episodes of Thundercats or Silverhawks back in the day, but we remember Robotech episodes clearly well,
I remember one episode of Thundercats with Snow Meow. That's it. That's only
Yeah, and I think that says a lot about the storytelling. I think the storytelling lacked in those shows. Clearly did with Tiger Sharks, when we talked about that show. And it's not to diss those shows directly. I'm just saying that the impact that those shows had, people love Thundercats now and they love Silverhawks when the toy lines come out. I think Robotech would have a similar vibe if they just pushed it a little bit harder.
And I think now that Harmony Gold, they extended I think for another 30 years is what they extended the contract
30
for.
years?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be up in 2021, so now it's going to be up in 2051, So I do think we're going to see more. My understanding is that I think COVID and stuff kind of slowed production down because it happened. They got that all came up in 2021 essentially. So I think that it kind of got slowed down. I think without COVID we might right now have more Robotech stuff at our fingertips and everything. But I'm gonna let Diallo go last. Zach, final thoughts on Robotech? Anything you want to talk about, the nostalgia of it, whatever.
I mean, outside of what I've already said, I don't think there's much more to tag on. I'll just conclude by saying I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad we're bringing attention to what I think is considered one of the most underappreciated cartoons in the 1980s in America.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say.
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, no, and honestly, this episode has clarified questions that I've had for 40 fucking years. Not quite understanding, and Diallo, thank you for clarifying a lot for me tonight. I love this franchise, I guess, as a whole, but I ultimately I think I love Robotech. I love the American version. I understand, the differences and stuff like that. But for me, the nostalgia is here in Robotech. And to this day, if you ever make a fucking live action movie and you don't make the F-16 Tomcat, the Veritech fighter, you ain't getting my ticket because that ain't Robotech. And I'm sorry, I don't care how you even if to say we had to retrofit these old. I don't give a fuck. Just make it happen. The Veritech fighter is the Warthog is the Tomcat. The Veritech fighter is the Tomcat. Diallo, buddy, any last words of wisdom that you want to lay on us or anything?
Yeah, no, just I think I covered everything. It's such a great. There in my life there are certain shows that's awakened me to long form storytelling on TV, and Robotech was maybe the first that I consciously was like really aware of, like, oh my God, this is doing so many things. There's romance, there's people are dying, there's the soap space opera aspect of it. Like I said, Robotech Masters, that middle series isn't like the best, but I liked how they created the connections, even though the shows were completely different, that made it feel like there was like this really multi-generational epic saga. And, like I said, a lot of people, there are, I mean, you're always going to find people like that are haters about like the fact that shows got, edited so much that they don't even consider them anime. I remember like back in the day, I was in a comic book store. Of course, you're going to find in a comic book store people having this kind of conversation. But, Mr.
What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. That guy that Zach just did was like, Voltron's not anime, because blah, 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 blah. But, again, there was really no other way that most of us were going to be able to watch any of this stuff. It was the way it was,
Right.
And it just like it was something more than Star Wars in a lot of ways. It's such a great story. It does different things. Even like it's just in Macross, it does all kinds of different things. I've always wanted to see a movie, but I also feel like you said, that they would mess it up. And obviously I love it so much, I wish that I could be the person in charge of making it, because I know I would do it. I have my stack of books like right in front of me. I can tell you like what to do and what not to do.
Wait, Diallo, story wise, how can they make the Tomcat be in 2024, if it was going to come out now, story wise, how would you make the Tomcat be the Veritech?
You just make it.
You don't even fucking explain it. You're just like that. No. We just use Tomcats.
Yeah, like it's just good. I don't even. I was actually just I was in Hawaii this past weekend, and we were at the airport, and they always have like they have the Air Force, the Air Force's ships are there, whatever. And we saw like these jets flying over, and I mean they basically looked like Tomcats, like they're updated or whatever, but they look pretty much the same, so the Robotech ships can look like why can't they, like, you know what I mean, like why can't they look like, you don't need to have any big, this is what they look like,
because some studio exec who makes millions of dollars will say, but it needs to be modern, and thus will neuter the entire franchise.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And when they cast it, and they cast that guy who has got Botox filler in his lips, who played Elvis in the Baz Luhrmann Elvis, whatever, that guy, right? When they cast him as Roy Fokker, he better damn well have long hair that covers part of his face when he puts his helmet on. I'm just saying.
And big sideburns too, man.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, it takes me back, when how Michael Bay did the Transformers.
Yeah.
It was like, I heard him talk about why he did all this stuff, but I really never understood it. Like,
same as the
cared at that point.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Why are they big and bulky and beefy?
Yeah, I just didn't. I didn't understand. I did not understand it. And
I think at that point too, it's like you just don't care too. When you find out that when they bastardize it, you're like, okay, well, you can make all the excuses you want. It still sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of the keys of off topic, but that's one of the keys of doing all this. The remake stuff is like actually making sure that you remember like what got you there, like what's the point of us being here in the first place, right? So you don't want to you don't buy the property because it had really cool Veritex and that's what people remember, and then you don't bother to do any of that. It drives me nuts when I see remakes that just completely forget the reason why we're here. It'd be like watching Battlestar Galactica. There's like no Galactica or Vipers or something. You know?
No, dude. Like, and I loved how Battlestar Galactica did it when they were like, these were the older versions, but it's what we have in the hangar because we were about to be mothballed, and that's perfect. So like, yes. The new Robotech movie takes place in 2024, but the military doesn't want to give the small Robotech team access to the new jets. So they're like, we got a gazillion fucking Tomcats over here. Just use those, and boom, one line of dialogue, and boom, you have Veritech fighters being Tomcats.
No, you just make them. This is what they look like. You don't even have a line in there. That's just what they look like.
I love how, Corey, you're trying to like eloquently justify it, and Diallo's like, no, just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
And I'm over here like, well, you could say budget cuts and you can make some sort of woke political agenda thing. No, just do it.
Just do it.
Fucking do it.
Like, it's, it's just whatever. Like, who knows?
But they won't, and Duke will always look like a dipshit as a action figure, and we'll just have to live vicariously through our memories.
Yep. Because
just plug me in and put me to sleep.
Because we live now in a day and age where all art, like all movies, are now made by a committee. Rarely are they made by like a singular individual, and everything is a committee that has to be, shareholder appeasement is the main, course of action in this day.
Yeah, which it's sad that that's the way it is, but I think that it's their way of mitigating risk. They are spending millions, but we end up getting weird like Madam Web projects where it's like, how did this how did this happen?
how did this happen? Well, capitalism, first of all.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. We got to wrap it up on a positive note.
Yes. Back to a positive note. Fucking, I love Robotech. This is awesome. This was a great discussion. I had an absolute blast talking about this with you guys. And yeah, I mean, this is always going to be the first anime, that I ever watched. Like, I love Akira, I love Vampire D, and stuff like that. And like I said, Dirty Pair, Gunsmith Cats, things like that. But like, this will always be the first anime I watched. And because I don't know if it's because of that, but it'll always be my favorite, specifically the American Harmony Gold Robotech series.
I will share one real quick fun fact that just jogged in my memory when he said Harmony Gold. I remember one of my first trips down to LA, driving past Harmony Gold Studios and getting so excited and hearing that theme song in my head to Robotech as we drove past the Harmony Gold, and I wanted to go in there so badly. I did not.
I mean, it's still like it's a Harmony Gold Theater now. I think every time you drive, you'd still like when you drive past that, you see the sign, and I personally have that every time I drive past it. I'm like, Harmony Gold.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling.
Yeah,
good feeling.
You hear
and our buddy Scott Zillner, right? And I will say, I think Scott Zillner, who runs so many great toy conventions and just comic book conventions, and he does actually do comic book conventions, unlike Comic-Con, where he celebrates comic book artists and writers and whatnot, including Diallo. He's a huge Robotech nerd, and I'm sure he has every single Robotech toy known to mankind. So when Corey goes to Japan once again and buys Diallo and I Robotech toys, we'll have to talk about it. We'll have to do a follow-up on Wrap Up After Dark. If you subscribe to patreon.com/podcasting after dark, you can hear all about Corey's trip to Japan and the Robotech toys he bought Diallo and I.
That's right. And actually, I think Robert Ortiz, I think he has a Robotech like bike helmet, I believe.
What does Robert Ortiz not have?
I know he has a 3D
shout
printed
out to
a 3D printed Battlestar Galactica, the old school, helmet.
Yeah.
He made that himself.
Yeah. It's badass.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Diallo, thank you for just hitting us with so much knowledge. Dude, You literally did what you brought me back to that schoolyard feeling of like if we were back in the day just talking about this shit and just educating me on all of that, which also you kind of did that with Doctor Who and Battlestar Galactica as well. So this was great. And I know that like we could probably do another whole episode on like another aspect of Robotech and everything, and I'm willing to dive further into it, but I think we did a pretty good job of covering everything. And I mean, I felt like I learned some stuff this episode that I never knew and everything. So again, Diallo, thank you for that. Really, really appreciate it. What you got going on, buddy? What's going on out there in the podcasting world for you?
Oh man, what's going on? We're still doing Galactica. Actually, we were taking a little break because life got really hectic for this past month, but we're going to be getting back to it again. We are off of New Caprica, and we are just about to do the first episode with the character Bulldog, who is Carl Lumbly. It was a great episode.
I love
Hero.
Carl Lumbly. I just saw him in, obviously we love him from Mantis, but I just saw him in The Fall of the House of Usher, and he was fucking fantastic.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so we're still doing that, and actually right before we went to record this, I just released the episode of another review you didn't ask for. I reviewed Reacher. Season 2, I just recently did Avatar, at least the premiere episode of Avatar, the live action one. American Fiction. I'm gonna be doing J-Lo's movie next, her video movie, and I just watched Dune Part 2 today, so I'll probably be doing an episode of that. So by the time this airs, that likely will be in existence. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, I just did a refresh on my website, and I think it looks really cool, adallojackson.com. And I am starting to reach out and do some stuff because it's time to move the next phase forward with Angela in the Dark. So we're talking about doing a 200-page graphic novel and possibly full-blown animation. So
yeah, baby.
Yeah. I'll be talking to Keika. Yeah, I emailed her, and I'll be we're gonna do a Zoom, and I'm gonna pick her brain, and so I'm thinking lots of big things. So I will obviously keep you posted, and still doing First Noel. I'm writing in the background. I'll be releasing new chapters and episodes of that. So that's what I've been up to.
Shout out to Grayscale Entertainment, that's Keika Lee is the founder of that studio. They put out really cool short animated shorts. I'm in one of them. Check them out as well.
Yeah, the animation style that they have is like it feels very like Disney / anime, and it's really, really cool stuff. So
awesome. Well, just keep that in mind when you're casting again, because this guy needs to do some. This guy has to work too.
I mean, we are you already have a role, brother.
Look at that. See, that's true friendship. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Diallo's like, you already have a role. It's all good.
Yeah, we're gonna start getting out there and getting some money, put some stuff together, and so yeah, that's what I'm doing. And then I'll be dreaming of being the executive producer or producer for Robotech series.
Man, I would love for that to happen, dude. Because I know you do it right, but I'm excited.
Right.
I'm excited for 2024 for you, my man. It sounds like it's going to be an awesome year, and I can't wait to see everything you do and support everything you do. Zach, I know you guys are rocking and rolling. It's always an awesome year over at $2 late fee and Territory Marks, but right now we are deep. We're into martial arts madness, baby.
Oh my gosh, we're crossing over onto podcasting after dark a little bit too with Paulette's pick, Knockabout. Yeah, and I before we even pitched doing the Robotech series, I shouted out Robotech on the Territory Marks episode last month in February. So I feel like we've kicked off this continuous connection between podcasting after dark, $2 late fee, $2 late fee and TV Obscura and Territory Marks. We are second episode into 80s Kids Unite, which dropped a week after this one. That's another martial art themed episode. We are going to be honoring Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in Territory Marks by covering 2 of his matches. Dustin Rubin from $2 late fee will be joining us for his inaugural episode as a guest on our show. Dustin has probably the least amount of knowledge when it comes to wrestling.
Even less than
which
me?
will make Oh yeah, which should make for hopefully a very entertaining episode. It is an entertaining episode. It was an entertaining episode. We're covering the dragon because it's the year of the dragon. So there's a lot of cross-pollination across the board with all the podcasts, and oh my gosh, it's so much fun. Last Dragon, just had an interview with Glenn Eaton, who plays Johnny Yu in The Last Dragon. Really inspirational. You can find out what he's been up to in that interview. And I'm excited to be doing what I love with the people I love.
And speaking of doing what you love with the people you love, you and I are going to be dropping the first episode of the Coscarelli Factor this month.
Yeah, baby.
On the Podcasting After Dark Patreon. That's patreon.com/podcasting after dark. Patreon.com/podcasting after dark. And yeah, so it'll still fall under the Auteur de Force tier where the Carpenter Factor lived, but essentially it's just the Carpenter Factor's all there from the first episode to the last one because we wrapped it up, and now it's just going to change. Basically, the hashtag is going to change to the Coscarelli Factor, and we will be dropping our, Zach, Jim the World's Greatest?
Jim the World's Greatest, which stars Gregory Harrison and Angus Scrimm, and he was known by another name when he did this movie. So 19-year-old Don Coscarelli doing a movie for Universal Studios back in 1975 or 6.
Wow.
Anyways, listen to the episode. We'll give you more insight. It's impressive. It's impressive for a first time debut. Jim the World's Greatest. It's Coscarelli is probably way more diverse in his filmography than John Carpenter is, with a much limited amount of movies that he's done.
Yeah, with like a third of the movies that John Carpenter's done. So a little a little inside baseball. We're recording that episode tomorrow, so I haven't even watched the movie yet. But that will drop this month. So go and check out patreon.com/podcasting after dark. And you can listen to right now every single episode of The Carpenter Factor. And there are, I believe, 25 or 26 episodes. It's about 2+ years worth that we were in John Carpenter's world, for better or worse. And I'm excited to dig into the Coscarelli Factor. But you can find all of our links over on podcastingafterdark.com. That's podcastingafterdark.com. You can find links to all of our podcatchers, social media, back episodes, back catalogs, Patreon links, all that kind of stuff. You can even have that's where our contact form is. If you want to reach out to us, maybe suggest a TV show for TV Obscura or something, then hit us up. We're always down for that, even though we have a massive shared iPhone note of TV Obscura ideas that will literally take us, if we don't add anything to it, will probably take us 5 years just now to get through all the shit we want to talk about. So TV Obscura ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
But you know who is going somewhere is Corey's going on his trip with his wife Myra to Japan to get Diallo and I Robotech merchandise and also have a good time there as well. So if you want to hear about a recap from his trip and what he got Diallo and I, go to patreon.com/podcasting after dark.
You know what I'm looking for, guys? I want to find some super deformed toys. Aren't they called chibi or something like that? But with
chibi, yeah.
Yeah, with the big heads and the little body, and I love that shit as a kid. I love those little fucking kind of toys as a kid. So I'm gonna be. I remember they actually made some Veritech toys like that actually transformed, and they were like, even when they were in like jet mode, they were super deformed and everything.
Yeah,
so if I could find
those.
something like that, holy shit, that's what I want.
They made wrestlers too for like Terry Funk and Oh gosh, I think Big Van Vader when they were over in Japan, and Stan Hansen. So, because those guys were big in Japan, as the song says.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on the lookout, and yes, I'll talk all about it on Wrap Up After Dark. But yeah, thanks guys, Robotech. This was great. I feel like this was a long time coming, but I think we nailed everything. So, Diallo, as always, do we have a Robotech outro here?
I was thinking the whole time, it's like I can't think of anything off the top of my head that flows. So I'm just gonna say, catch you on the obscure side.
Catch you on the Veritech side.
Ah, there you go. Catch you on the Guardian side.
Catch you on the Protoculture side.
Catch you on the Minmay side.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, actually, no. My favorite is one of the bridge girls. Her name's Kim. Forget Lisa. Forget Minmay. It's Kim. So catch me on the Kim side.
Hey. Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim.
And I'm Dean.
And we're the hosts of Talking Back. We're a retro-based podcast covering movies, comics, video games, and more.
Check us out every Monday where we hit the rewind button and dig into some of our favorite content from the past. We like to keep things fun, lighthearted, and informative.
Do you feel like you need more nostalgia in your life? Then check out Talking Back. We're available everywhere podcasts are found.